Hey everyone! In 2019, Masterbox released 2 more figures in the Strange Company saga. These 2 characters, the gladiatorial versions of Beauty and the Beast, make up episode 3 in the series, which is titled Future Crew Members. The figure of Helen, or Helen Parsons, was released in kit number 24056, and both of the figures which appear in episode 3 are pictured in a gladiatorial arena. She is trained as a Dimachirus gladiator, the master of 2 blades, who looks like quite a formidable fighter. All I can say is, Masterbox, you crazy Ukrainians, what were you thinking?
The fallen Madonna with the big boobies.
The fallen Madonna with the big boobies.
The fallen Madonna with the big boobies.
The big boobies.
The big boobies.
I must admit, the box art is up to the usual high standards of Masterbox, and is in itself an excellent source of reference when it comes to painting this character. I'm not too sure how we jumped from episode 1 to episode 3, however. I guess someone lost count somewhere along the line. Like the previous characters in the series, she has an interesting backstory, and I think the gladiatorial theme does add another dimension to our Strange Company team. The color table is very detailed, and has equivalences in 4 popular brands of paints. The trusted old barroom scene has been extended even further to include these new characters. On the inside of the box is a plastic bag containing a sprue set and the instructions for assembling and painting the figurine. The various parts which make up the final sculpt are highly detailed, with a lot of interesting features which should create an impressive final result. The parts were well molded, with a few obvious seam lines which were going to require a little extra cleanup work. One can build Helen in 2 different ways, either in a 2-bladed pose or standing with 1 blade and a shield. Neither of the 2 variants did much to obscure her more interesting bits, however. After checking which parts I needed, I clipped them from the sprue tree, careful not to damage them in any way. I decided to stick to the box art and assemble version 1 in the instructions, where Helen is in a fighter stance holding up the 2 blades which she is famous for. The mold lines were slowly scraped away, and I took great care not to damage any of the finer details of each part. I glued together the main parts of the figure, including her arms and legs, and filled some of the gaps on her sides with modeler's putty. After a bit of gentle sanding, she was ready for her base coat. To simplify the painting process, some of the smaller parts were painted separately and only glued onto her main body right at the end. All of her parts received a black base coat, followed by a zenithal highlight, where I sprayed some white ink from above, which helps to emphasize many of the finer details. For her skin, I started with a base layer of Vallejo brown rose, which I applied in a couple of thin coats so as not to obscure the small details of the sculpt. After I was satisfied that I had good coverage for the skin's initial coat, I applied some saddle brown to all of the leather parts. The same brown base coat was also painted onto the areas which would later receive a metallic bronze color, as the brown undercoat really causes the bronze to appear extra shiny. All of her leather straps and her boots were painted in thin layers. I left her shins unpainted, as parts of her armor would be glued there, and I wanted a fairly paint-free surface to allow the plastic parts to bond firmly. As her greaves were to receive a bronze coat, they were also painted with an initial coat of saddle brown. I did the same for her pauldron and her helmet. After base coating the remaining bits with red, I started layering subsequently lighter coats of flesh tone to create a mid-tone highlight. I tried to blend each layer into the previous one to create smooth and natural transitions between the colors. After allowing some drying time, I made sure that all of the areas of exposed skin were painted and did a few touch-ups where needed. The next step was to paint up her bronze armor. This was done very slowly and in light coats, as I didn't want to ruin all of the hard work I'd done on her skin. The finer details were picked out carefully with a fine tip paintbrush, and I followed up by placing a few small highlights of silver on parts where the sunlight would strike them. Her blades were undercoated with gloss black and then painted with gunmetal grey, followed with silver edge highlights. As a final step in the painting process, I applied a black wash to all of the metallic parts. The leather parts received a brown wash using some of Citadel's Seraphim sepia. The wash settles into the recesses of the model, and this helps to emphasize all of those amazing details which are sculpted into the Mini. Then it was time to glue on all of the smaller parts which were painted separately. I scraped the surfaces carefully to provide as much bare plastic as possible so that the glue could form a solid bond between the parts. I used a thicker type of glue than before, as it had a longer curing time, which would cause a stronger bond to form. Helen Parsons was a lieutenant on board the Galaxy Battle Fleet research vessel, the Magellan. On a mission in the Cassiopeia constellation, the Magellan stumbled across a planet which held a dark and ominous secret. The mere discovery of the mysterious planet sealed the fate of the Magellan's crew, and they were brutally murdered by the Galactic Security Service to guarantee their silence. Helen managed to escape the carnage and commandeered a pirate ship, the Devastator. For 3 long years she managed to evade capture, but eventually they caught up with her. The head of the GSS was very impressed with Helen's physical and mental powers, so he devised a grisly punishment for her. He arranged for her memories to be erased and had her trained to become a Dimachurus gladiator, a master of fighting with 2 blades. She quickly rose up through the ranks, and she was soon acclaimed throughout the galaxy. During the Galactic Jubilee, she fought her way to the top of the All-Galaxy Gladiator Games. Her final battle was against Chuck, a fellow crew member from her pirate ship, who was a monster from deep within the underdeveloped territories. As she was about to confront Chuck, her memories suddenly came flooding back, and she realized that they had to escape. Their only hope was to join the crew of Strange Company and take a stand against the savage forces of the Galactic Security Services. Masterbox Kit number 24057 is one of a vicious looking character referred to as a Beastorian champion, a Beastorian being one of the many beast-like races. He is more commonly referred to as Chuck, also known as Nefroth. His backstory is fairly intertwined with that of Helen Parsons, and the pair make an intriguing addition to the saga of Strange Company. Once again, we have an informative table for his basic paint scheme with equivalents in various popular brands. The inside instructions provide a basic guide for building and painting the figure. The parts themselves are well molded, and I really love the exaggerated details of his muscle definition. I clipped his parts from their sprue tree and gently scraped away the mold lines. I assembled Chuck's upper and lower body, but decided to paint them separately as it would make things a little easier. The parts came together quite well, although there were a few gaps which needed to be filled and sanded. All of the parts were coated with Vallejo black surface primer. I added a zenithal highlight with white ink, which I sprayed from above the Mini in order to highlight the finer details of the figure. I base coated his skin parts with thin layers of Vallejo brown-green, slowly building up the opacity after each layer. I made an effort to remove excess paint before it obscured any of the details of his musculature. While the base coat for the skin was drying, I added some Vallejo scarlet and saddle brown to the wet palette. These colors tied up with the ones I'd used on Porcelain and strengthened the connection between these 2 characters. Chuck's blade received a coat of gloss black to prepare it for the metallics later on. After a second skin base coat, I applied his mid-tone color by slowly layering up with progressively lighter paint ratios. I used some Seraphim sepia as a wash for his leather parts, taking time to prevent any pooling of the wash on any part of the model. I wasn't too happy with the way his skin tone was blended, so I decided to use some of Citadel's Biltane green to act as a glaze and smooth out those harsh transitions. And then it was finally time to assemble the completed figure. Once again, I scraped away any excess paint where necessary and applied some glue at the points of contact. When everything was cemented into place, I made a few small touch-ups with a paintbrush, and Chuck, our Bistorian champion, was done. Nifroth was a Bistorian champion from deep within the belt of the underdeveloped territories. His name was unpronounceable by humans, so he was simply called Chuck by his fellow crew members on the pirate ship, the Devastator. The Devastator was seized by Lieutenant Helen Parsons during a battle with the Galactic Security Services. After 3 years of evading the GSS, the pirate ship and its entire crew were captured. According to galactic law, all pirates are immediately executed. However, the GSS spared Chuck's life, opting instead to imprison him and train him as a gladiator. A few years of captivity turned the already vicious Nifroth into a real monster. During the final round of the All-Galaxy Gladiator Games held at the Galactic Jubilee, Chuck came face to face with one of his old crew members, Lieutenant Helen Parsons. Together they hatched up an elaborate escape plan and fled the games to team up as new crew members at the edge of the universe to share in the adventures of strange company. So long, and thanks for watching.